The hum of the ship's core thrummed like a distant heartbeat, steady and cold. Metal walls stretched in every direction, seamless and sterile, doused in pale blue light. The cargo hold smelled of ozone and sterilization fluid, a scent that never left the air for long. Chains rattled with every twitch of movement. And for hours, there was only that sound and breathing. Slow, controlled, tense. He sat with his back pressed to a steel support column, wrists shackled to the floor behind him. Sweat clung to his neck. Not from heat, but the stillness, the boredom, the dread. His name was Kale, though the guards rarely used it. Human, 47 sufficed. His black shirt clung to his skin, torn at the collar. Cuts lined his arms where the bindings chafed, but he barely registered the pain anymore. Across the room, separated by a narrow strip of cold floor and 6 meters of reinforced glass, she sat as still as a sculpture. She hadn't moved in hours. Pale blue skin shimmered faintly in the overhead lights, smooth as polished stone. Her white hair was braided tightly down her back, a braid frayed in places, the way something long neglected begins to unravel. She was armored, part organic, part forged, the lines of suit molding to her shape like it had grown from her skin. If she was injured, she didn't show it. Kale watched her, not out of curiosity, but necessity. She was the only thing in that room not bolted down, not part of the cold, humming machinery. They hadn't spoken since the guards dropped her off 3 rotations ago. Not a word. But she watched him when she thought he wasn't looking. "Hey," Kale said, his voice hoarse from disuse. No response. "You ever blink?" The girl didn't stir. "You know, they say if you stare too long at a human, he might fall in love with you." His lips twitched, a hint of dry amusement. "Or bite. Depends on the mood." Finally, she shifted, slowly, deliberately. Her head tilted just enough to look directly at him, and for the first time he saw her eyes, silver, sharp, and entirely unimpressed. "I'm not your pet," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of contempt. Kale raised his eyebrows. "Didn't say you were. You looked at me like one." He grunted, the smallest laugh escaping. "No, I looked at you like you might actually have a name, not like the guards do." She didn't answer, just stared a moment longer before returning to stillness, arms wrapped around her knees, head turned away. Kale shifted his position against the post. Chains clinking. "You got one, though? A name?" Silence. "All right," he said. "I'll call you not pet until you correct me." She exhaled, whether out of irritation or amusement, he wasn't sure. A mechanical hiss sounded from the ceiling as one of the maintenance drones slid by, scanning the perimeter. The guards hadn't come back since the last shift, and Kale knew that meant something was wrong elsewhere on the ship. He could feel it in the pacing of the security lights, the too long silences between footsteps in the hallway. Whatever kept them locked up in this corner of the cruiser was either distracted or dead. Kale leaned his head back against the pillar. "You see what they did to the guy before you? Big one, for arms, teeth like glass." The girl didn't respond, but her ear twitched. She was listening. "They zapped him so many times. I could smell the smoke. Didn't scream, though, just kept throwing himself at the wall until they dragged him out. Don't know what they wanted from him. Probably the same thing they want from you." She turned her head, just slightly. "And what's that?" Kale shrugged as best he could with chained shoulders. "Depends. Could be your blood. Could be your brain. Could be nothing. Sometimes they just like breaking things that make them feel small." She looked away again, but not before he saw it, that flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. He watched her for a while longer. Her shoulders weren't as square as they had been when she first arrived. The armor around her arms was scratched now, thin hairline cracks along one of the bracers. She was fraying, even if she wouldn't admit it. "They gave you food?" he asked. She didn't answer. "I've got some," he said. "Ration bar. Tastes like chalk and lies, but it's yours if you want it." "No," she replied quickly, sharply. "I don't take scraps." Kale chuckled. "Suit yourself. Chalk and lies for me, then." He leaned forward to dig the bar out of a loose flap in his boot. She watched from the corner of her eye, curiosity masked as disdain. When he tore the wrapper with his teeth, She flinched. You ever been planet-side? He asked between bites. Not counting wherever you're from. I was born in orbit. Figures. He swallowed. I used to climb cliffs on Virex Minor. Big, red stone columns just spearing into the sky. No tether, no suit. Wind sharp enough to flay you. My sister used to dare me to jump across the gaps. Idiot that I was, I always did. The alien girl blinked. Slowly. Why are you telling me this? Because this place is too damn quiet, he said. And if I don't talk, I start thinking. Thinking leads to fear. Fear leads to bad decisions. She lowered her head against her knees. Her fingers curled slightly into fists. Then keep talking, she murmured. Just not about me. Cale nodded, moored himself into her. All right, Virex Minor it is. He told her about the storms, about the time a sand viper coiled around his leg mid-jump, and how he nearly lost 3 fingers to frostbite. She didn't speak, but her breathing evened out in her eyes, those sharp silver things, softened at the edges. Somewhere down the corridor, a klaxon sounded, brief, clipped, then silent again. The ship vibrated beneath them, just once, like something heavy had slammed into its spine. Cale and the girl both tensed. Attack? He asked, moored himself into her. No. Her voice was almost inaudible. Docking clamp disengaged. That wasn't a strike. It was release. She rose slowly, fluidly, like water finding its shape. Her restraints clinked against her legs as she moved closer to the edge of her cell, gaze locked on the ceiling like she could see through it. Cale watched her. How do you know that? I can feel the gravity shift. Your kind can't. Not like mine. Cale's mouth tightened. He wanted to ask more, but something in her posture stopped him. She wasn't offering answers, just warnings. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The hum grew louder. No voices, no boots, just a machine. He pressed his palm to the floor. It was warmer than before. Whatever was happening, it was coming fast. The alien girl turned, and for the first time, her expression shifted. Not anger, not cold calculation, but something close to fear. She looked at Cale directly, her voice barely above a whisper. They're not coming back. Something worse is... He stared back, the knot in his chest tightening. And without another word, she stepped forward and curled into his lap, armor creaking softly as she fit herself against him like a cat folding into safety. Her head rested against his shoulder, breath even but shallow. Cale blinked, stunned. I thought you weren't my pet. I'm not, she murmured. Just don't want to die alone. His arms hesitated, then closed around her, chains rattling as he held her close. The hum of the ship deepened again. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The silence after her words settled over them like fog. Cale sat stiffly, unsure if moving would shatter the strange, fragile moment or if it would simply wake him from something unreal. The alien girl, no longer faceless, no longer a distant shape behind glass, breathed evenly in his arms, like a heartbeat echoing into someone else's chest. Her skin was colder than he expected, smooth but rigid beneath her armor. She didn't tremble. She didn't speak again. She simply existed there, curled into the space he hadn't realized was waiting for her. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time bled out in that ship, warped and empty. Cale kept his hands where they were, cautious not to clutch her too tightly, not to lose the unexpected trust she'd handed him like glass. He didn't know what she'd meant. I don't want to die alone, but he understood it in a language deeper than words. Eventually, her body shifted. She pulled away slowly, rising to her feet with the quiet grace of something bred for balance. Her expression was unreadable again, the softness drained from her features like breath from glass. Cale watched her dust off invisible debris, her shoulders settling once more into square defiance. You don't have to say anything, he offered. I wasn't going to. Fair enough. A distant boom echoed from somewhere deep in the ship's hull, faint but sharp. Cale turned his head instinctively. Still think that was an attack? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes narrowed, lips slightly parted, as if listening to something beyond his perception. No, not an attack. A misfire. Or sabotage. You sure? I feel it. Your kind doesn't listen to ships like mine does. Cale leaned back, his chains clinking faintly against the steel post. All right, let's pretend I believe you. You should. She turned toward him. Because if this ship is falling apart, and we're still in chains when it happens, it won't matter what species we are. We'll burn the same. He tilted his head. I thought you didn't care. I care, she said simply. Just not about them. She glanced at the sealed door. Or what they want. Cale studied her. Her face was sharp and symmetrical, but not conventionally beautiful. Not in the human sense. Her features were angular, crafted by some other standard of evolution. Her eyes, silver and reflective, seemed to catch more than light. They saw intent. They waited. Tell me your name, he said, softer this time. She looked down, the pause long and uncomfortable. Then, almost reluctantly, she spoke. Celine. He smiled just a little. Celine, that's better than not pet. Barely. Still better. She crouched, inspecting the edge of the grated floor beneath her. A soft click escaped from beneath one of her gauntlets as she pressed her fingers into a narrow seam. The tile shifted slightly. Cale's eyebrows lifted. You planning something? I was bred to be a weapon, she said, not looking up. They taught me to count bolts by sound, to feel resonance shifts in metal. They forgot to remove those instincts. That's terrifyingly impressive. She paused, then gave him a look he couldn't quite place, something between pride and regret. They thought if they kept me caged long enough, I'd forget how to fight. Did you? I forgot how not to. Cale's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say to that. She tugged at the tile, and it lifted just enough to reveal a narrow crawl space underneath. Not big enough to escape through, not yet, but it was a start. She stared into the darkness beneath, then glanced at the panel locking Cale's chains. You're not useless, she said finally. That a compliment? It's a fact. I'll take it as both. She gestured toward the tile. We'll need tools. Something to cut power to the maglocks. I can get into the conduits. But if I die in there, I want you to at least try to finish the job. Cale laughed, short, disbelieving. You're trusting me with the escape plan already? You held me without flinching, she said. That means more than you'd think. He looked away for a moment. You're not the first alien I've seen suffering here, but you're the first who fought back. Not just against them, against me. You made me listen. Her eyes narrowed, but not in hostility. Most humans don't listen. That's what my sister used to say. She's dead now. A guard shot her during a protest. Celine was silent. He continued. They arrested me for carrying her body off the street. Called me a terrorist. I've been here ever since. She studied him like a data file. You're not what I expected. Likewise, another tremor shook the floor. This one was deeper, more sustained. The lights flickered again, but longer, then dimmed. Power's bleeding somewhere, Celine muttered. They're losing containment in one of the engine wings. Cale's stomach nodded. What happens if it ruptures? The ship breaks apart. If we're lucky, we suffocate before we burn. That's the lucky part. Yes. Her voice was flat. Footsteps rang out in the corridor. Heavy boots, at least 3 guards. Celine vanished into stillness in an instant, returning to her earlier position. Cale slouched back against the post, making himself look exhausted and harmless. The door hissed open. A flood of artificial light spilled into the room, and with it came the metallic stench of scorched polymer. The lead guard entered with 2 others behind him, all clad in reinforced armor, faces hidden behind blank helmets. They walked straight past Cale, eyes fixed on Celine. On your feet, the lead one barked. She didn't move. He raised a pulse baton. I said, she's still recovering. Cale, cut in. She's been in here without food. That protocol breach is on you. The guard turned toward him, slow and deliberate. Say that again, prisoner? Cale held his gaze. She's a diplomatic asset. If she dies in here, your superior's going to be the one breathing vacuum. The guard hesitated. Celine's eyes flicked toward Cale with something like restrained shock. Fine, the guard said, lowering the baton. But the council wants her ready for extraction by next cycle. If she's weak, you both burn. The guards left as swiftly as they came, boots pounding the corridor like war drums. The door slammed shut and the silence returned. Celine turned toward him, one eyebrow raised. Diplomatic asset? It sounded convincing. I could have handled them. I know, Cale said, but maybe I didn't want to see you get shocked for the third time this week. She stared at him for a long moment, then turned back to the crawl space. I'll try the vent access again during next power drop. That's when the sensors flicker. He nodded. And if you don't come back... She paused. Then you figure it out. Survive, even if it means leaving me behind. That's not happening. You might not get a choice. Cale leaned his head against the pillar, watching her disappear into the grate. For a long while, the only sounds were distant groans of the ship's failing systems and the soft scraping of Celine's movements in the conduit. He closed his eyes, just for a second. Somewhere above them, the ship creaked, its hull groaning like a dying giant. The countdown had already begun. The crawl space swallowed Celine without ceremony, the panel clicking shut behind her. For the first time since she'd entered his life like a ghost made of steel and silence, Cale was truly alone again. He stared at the spot she'd disappeared into, hearing only the faintest echoes of her movements, metal brushing metal, distant thuds swallowed by the ship's bowels. Every part of him wanted to listen, to track her path like a lifeline, but the failing hum of the ship had grown into a low, mechanical groan that pressed against his ears like rising pressure. He shifted against the pillar, straining his wrist where the chain still bound him. His fingers, bruised and cut, probed the links. He had to do something. He couldn't just wait for her to succeed or fail. His breath came slower now, not out of calm, but focus. They were running out of time. The ship felt unstable, like a bottle held just above the floor, trembling, waiting to shatter. A hiss interrupted the stillness. The door opened again, but it wasn't the guards this time. It was another prisoner, tall, thick-limbed, limping. He was thrown inside like garbage. The moment his body hit the ground, the door sealed behind him with a sharp clang. Cale stared, every muscle tensing. The new arrival groaned, pushed himself to his knees. He had mottled skin, slick with sweat, and his arms were layered in crude tattoos, symbols Cale didn't recognize. One eye was swollen shut. The other burned with something feral. "You must be the welcoming committee," the man rasped, voice like rusted wire. Cale didn't answer. The prisoner staggered upright, chains dragging behind him. The air shifted. This man wasn't like them. He didn't belong in a holding chamber. He belonged in a war zone. The kind of man who didn't care whether you lived or died, so long as he felt something breaking in the process. The stranger's gaze swept the room and landed on Cale. "You're human." Sharp observation. He grinned, teeth blood-stained. "That's good. I get bored with aliens. They scream too much." Cale's fists clenched around the cold metal, binding him. "You plan on testing that theory?" "Not yet. Just curious who gets the fancy company." His gaze dropped to the crawl panel Celine had vanished into. "I saw what they brought in last shift. That wasn't standard cargo. Don't talk about her." "Or what?" The man stepped closer. "You'll glare at me to death?" Cale's shoulders tensed, but he didn't rise to the bait. He wouldn't give him that satisfaction. He needed to stay calm. This wasn't a fight he could win, not chained, not injured. But if Celine came back and found this man near him... The thought vanished when the man suddenly moved, lunging toward Cale like a predator striking wounded prey. Cale barely had time to roll. The stranger's boot slammed into floor where his head had been, the clang echoing like a gunshot. Chains tangled. Cale kicked upward, catching the man's shin, but it was like kicking a stone wall. Pain flared in his ribs as the man punched him, once, twice, laughing with each blow. Cale tried to curl defensively, but the position made it worse. He felt something crack. A rib. "Get off," he gasped, spitting blood. "I like the sound of that," the man said, raising a fist again. Before it had fall, a sound ripped through the air, a sharp, vibrating hum followed by a crack. The man froze, then collapsed. Cale blinked. Celine stood behind him, her hand raised, bristling with energy. Static curled around her fingertips. Her braid was loose now, armor scraped and blackened. She was panting. She had returned. Without a word, she stepped over the unconscious prisoner and knelt beside Cale. Her hands hovered briefly, then settled on the links of his shackles. Her fingers moved quickly, precisely, and the lock disengaged with a hiss and a pop. He gasped as blood returned to his arms, curling his wrists and flexing sore muscles. "Are you all right?" she asked, voice taut. "I will be," he said, groaning. "You came back. You sound surprised. I've been alone a long time. People leave." She studied him, then offered a rare, subtle smile. "Not yet." He tried to rise, failed, winced. Ribs cracked. She offered her arm. "Lean on me." He hesitated, not out of pride, but because the idea of touching her now, when she'd saved him without question, felt different than before. Less survival, more gravity. He took the support. Together, they crossed the cell. She led him to the crawlspace entrance, deeper than before, guiding him through narrow tunnels filled with stale air and flickering light. The deeper they went, the more the ship's decay became evident. Power conduits torn open, pipes weeping steam, lights dead or flickering like candles. "They've lost control," Celine whispered. "Life support's rerouting through emergency subsystems. Which means, soon we'll have atmosphere loss, fires, then collapse. Still time to escape?" She looked at him, jaw tight. "If we move now, and if the hangar is not sealed." They climbed through a vertical shaft into a lower deck, where Cale could finally breathe more fully. His limbs throbbed, but he forced them forward. They were beyond confinement now. Each step counted. The corridor ahead split in two. Celine paused, scanning the environment. Cale leaned on the wall to catch his breath. "Left leads to the drone bay," she said. "Right to navigation. Hangars through the NAV wing. Then right it is." They moved. Quick, quiet. The ship groaned again, more urgently now, as though warning them not to linger. In the navigation wing, 2 guards stood near a control panel, armed but distracted, arguing in hushed tones. Cale's heart seized. Celine held up a hand and crouched, pulling him behind cover. "I'll disable them," she said. "Stay here. I can help. Your ribs say otherwise." Before he could argue further, she was gone, slipping into shadow like a ghost. Seconds later, a flicker of light burst behind the guards, and both men fell in silent heaps, as if the shadows themselves had devoured them. Cale limped to her side. "How you do that?" "Practice," she said, already moving. They reached the final set of blast doors. Beyond them lay the hangar. "Locked?" Cale asked. "Of course. And we can override it?" "I'm about to find out." She crouched at the panel, her fingers dancing across a field of alien script. Sparks flew. The system groaned. Cale looked over his shoulder, back toward the direction they'd come. Somewhere far behind, he could still feel the weight of that predator they'd left breathing. If only barely. He wouldn't stay down forever. The panel beeped once. Then the door opened. Wind slammed into them. The hangar's artificial gravity was beginning to fail, and with it came disorientation, pressure shifts, drifting crates, flickering lights overhead. But in the center of the room, untouched, sat a single escape pod. Cale stared. "That still works." "It's isolated from the ship's main systems," Celine said. "Intended for high-ranking personnel. We count. We do now." They ran. Cale forced his legs to obey. Celine reached the pod first, tearing open the access panel. Cale climbed in after her, collapsing into the seat beside her as she sealed the hatch. The pod systems blinked to life, soft white light bathing them both. A countdown flickered on the screen. Automatic launch in 20 seconds. Celine turned to him, hands hovering over the controls. "You sure about this? Do we have a choice?" "There's always a choice," she said, then hit the ignition. The pod lurched. The stars swam past the viewport like living dust, brilliant and cold. The escape pod coasted through space, its engines long since cooled, reliant now on momentum and drifting silence. Inside, Cale sat half reclined in his seat, ribs tightly wrapped in salvage bindings, eyelids heavy with exhaustion, but mind too alert for sleep. Opposite him, Celine worked wordlessly at the auxiliary panel, her long fingers dancing over unfamiliar keys with quiet precision. Neither had spoken since the launch, not for lack of things to say, but because the silence between them now was different. Not avoidance, not distrust, something slower, thicker, a quiet too full to shatter casually. Cale broke it first. "You said there's always a choice," he murmured. "Back on the ship?" Celine didn't look up. "I did." "Then why didn't you choose to leave me?" Her fingers paused, resting over the display. The light from the stars caught her face at an angle, sharpening her features until she looked carved from crystal. She glanced at him. "Because I remembered what it felt like to be held and not hurt," she said softly. "That matters more than escape." Cale's throat tightened. He nodded, unsure what to say to that. The pod's internal display blinked red, a proximity warning. Celine shifted instantly, leaning toward the screen. Her back straightened. "What is it?" Cale asked, alert again. "Something's trailing us. Distance. 30,000 kilometers and closing." "Another ship?" "Not just any ship," she said, eyes narrowing. "It's one of theirs." Cale sat up, ignoring the stab in his ribs. "They found us." Celine didn't answer at first. She stared at the screen as if she could will it to lie. But it didn't. A ship was coming, sleek, fast, designed for pursuit. It hadn't fired yet. That was the only grace they had. "How fast can this pod go?" Cale asked. "Not fast enough." "Then what do we do?" She hesitated, then stood, moving toward the rear compartment. Cale followed her with his eyes, but didn't move. His limbs felt like rusted metal. He didn't want to ask the question he already knew the answer to. She returned moments later with a compact device, a crystalline orb encased in thin coils of silver. She held it like it might burn her. "What is that?" he asked. "A pulse core," she replied. "Short-range jump engine. Military grade. Illegal on escape pods." Cale blinked. "You had that this whole time?" "I built it from scraps while they kept me in that cell. It's unstable. Might fail. Might vaporize us. And you're considering using it now?" She looked at him, and her voice was firm. "If they catch us, they'll separate us. Dissect me. Kill you. We don't have time for caution." He nodded slowly. "Then do it." Celine opened the access panel beside the command station and inserted the core. The pod's lights dimmed instantly, then flickered with strange pulses of energy. The stars outside seemed to warp, lines stretching like reflections on water. Cale gripped the seat. "Coordinates?" she asked. "I don't care. Somewhere empty. Somewhere far." She smirked faintly. "That I can do." She tapped the final sequence. The pulse engine began to hum, a high, rising frequency that made Cale's teeth ache. The pursuing ship grew larger in the window, lights blooming along at hull. 5 seconds, she said. Cale stared at her. She hadn't buckled in. "Celine." She turned to him. "If the jump rips the pod apart, I want the last thing I see to be you," she said. Before he could speak, the stars exploded. The pod launched into the void with a burst of impossible motion. Light shattered, twisted, collapsed. Reality folded in on itself and then reassembled. Silence returned. Cale gasped, lungs rebelling. The pod stabilized. The stars outside were unfamiliar now. Denser, older, closer to the edge of map space. The enemy ship was gone. Celine stumbled slightly, catching herself on the wall. Her lips were pale, her arms trembling. Cale unbuckled himself, stood, and caught her before she collapsed. "I told you to sit," he muttered, lowering her gently to the floor. "I didn't lie," she murmured, blinking slowly. "About the risks. You also didn't die, so that's one win." She nodded weakly. "But we can't stay here. The core is spent. No more jumps. No more systems. We'll drift now." Cale looked around the pod. No alarms, no indicators of immediate danger, but no rescue either. Just endless stars and the faint breath of recycled air. We'll figure it out, he said, like we always do. Celine looked up at him, her voice quiet but firm. Why do you believe that? He shrugged, a smile playing at the edge of his mouth. Because you're terrifyingly competent and I'm stubborn. It's a good combination. She laughed, and the sound surprised both of them. It was dry, fragile, but real. Then her face turned serious again. They'll send more, she said. That ship wasn't working alone. Once they find wreckage, they'll track the energy trail. Cale nodded. Then we keep running. You don't even know what I am, she whispered. What I was made to do. I don't care. You should. He reached forward, took her hand in his, carefully, gently. I don't need to understand every piece of your past to know what you've chosen now. You saved me. You saved us. You chose freedom. Her eyes searched his, and for once, she didn't look guarded. She looked exposed, human, in all the ways that mattered. I'm tired, she said. Then rest. I'll keep watch. Celine laid her head on his shoulder. This time, there was no tension, no uncertainty. Just warmth. Wait, something real. Cale leaned back against the pod's wall, watching the stars pass by. They didn't know what planet lay ahead. They had no map, no plan, no promise of peace. But they had each other. And somewhere in the chaos of broken ships and broken systems, that felt like enough. For now,